White Death. Simo Häyhä was born on December 17, 1905, in the small town of Raujärvi, Finland, near the Russian border. His colleagues described him as a friendly, polite, and introverted man who did not like to socialize and only worked as a farm laborer. Raujärvi is surrounded by the harsh Finnish wilderness, so although Simo grew up in a quiet area far from city life, his own life was far from easy. A harsh and unforgiving winter forces the people of southeastern Finland to come to terms with the wild nature around them. Initially, Simo excelled as a naturally talented hunter, spending much of his youth outside in the woods shooting small game with an old double-barreled rifle. At the age of 20, he served in the military and was promoted to corporal. He entered several skiing and shooting competitions. He is a true biathlete and he is very famous for his rifle skills. Like most Finnish men, he joined the national militia after his military service. This is the suojeluskunta, a service for young men since Finland's declaration of independence in 1917 and the Civil War the following year. The service trains people like Häyhä to be prepared for when Finland needs them most. The Soviet Union declares war. The moment came on November 30, 1939, when the Soviet Union declared war on Finland. People like Simo Häyhä, who had a modest upbringing, cared little about world politics or the ambitions of dictators of the time such as Joseph Stalin. But like most Finns, he is fiercely independent and values his and his country's freedom above all else. These freedoms will be lost if the Finnish people do not defend them, no matter how great the enemy. So when the call to arms came, Häyhä, like most of his compatriots, answered. He joined the 13th Infantry Regiment in the Kola area, north of Lake Ladoga. The Soviet 9th and 14th Armies aimed for a quick breakthrough across the Kolanjoki River, but they were completely unprepared to fight in the area. Densely forested and virtually non-existent at the best of times, the Soviets were now trying to advance in one of the worst winters in modern history, with 2 meters of snow and temperatures dropping to -30 degrees. Häyhä was given a Finnish Mosin Nagant M28 30ths, which had been in production since 1928. Slightly shorter and slightly heavier than the Russian-made rifle, but with the reliability and accuracy typical of the Mosin Nagant, the M28 was an excellent sniper rifle. Nicknamed Pistikorva, pointed ear, because of the large ears on the front, this rifle would perform well in the hands of an experienced marksman like Simo Häyhä. The Finns could not hope to win against the might of the Soviet army in direct combat. The Soviets had more tanks, men and artillery. In contrast, the Finnish art of war relied heavily on hit-and-run tactics, with men on skis who knew the terrain to outflank, infiltrate, and ambush lumbering Soviet invaders, many of whom didn't have skis or didn't know how to ski, thereby harassing mobility. While the Finns were naturally accustomed to winter conditions, the Soviet troops were anything but. Many came from the Leningrad military district and were not even equipped for a long, drawn-out conflict. Unforgiving weather conditions. White Death winters in Finland are harsh and unforgiving, and even when the sun comes out on the short days, it is still very cold. Häyhä wore a thick, heavy snowsuit, isolating himself as much as possible from the snow and cold wind, and he wore fur gloves and a sniper's mask. The white color of her outfit blends perfectly with the winter environment and snow-covered forests of Kola. He prefers to work alone, because he is used to scouting dense forests alone, and he knows to rely on his instincts. Patience is essential, as important as leaving as few traces as possible. A hunter must be cunning and careful in his actions. Carrying only a day's supply of food and about 50 or 60 rounds of ammunition, Häyhä relied on his knowledge of the wilderness to find a good place to build a sniper's nest. Once it finds its position, it will build a small snow fort around it to blend in with its surroundings. He rested his rifle on a mound of snow that stabilized his aim and prevented the snow from being thrown upwards by the recoil, and waited for the enemy to march into his field of slaughter. When Soviet soldiers, struggling and freezing in the snow, crossed his path, Häyhä put a handful of snow in his mouth to hide his breath. Then he pulled the trigger. It is said that during his training in the army, he was able to hit targets at a distance of 150 meters, up to 16 times a minute. So now, the route was littered with dead Soviet soldiers who fell prey to hidden snipers, with no idea what had befallen them. The Soviet positions were soon found devoid of living men, but littered with corpses, frozen in their final movements before being shot and killed. Sometimes they are found still standing. At temperatures below 0 degrees, even minor injuries are often fatal, because a weakened body will have a harder time surviving bad weather. Source: Julius Joshkalainen, CC by 2.0, via Wikimedia Commons. Häyhä is not believed to have often missed its targets. In his short time on the front lines, the number of casualties rose to unprecedented levels. Hundreds of people died as a result of his gunfire, so much so that his superiors didn't believe the stories at first. According to records, just before Christmas, he killed 25 soldiers in just one day. While many Finnish and Soviet snipers used modern sniper rifles equipped with telescopic lenses, Häyhä relied on ancient iron sights. Not only did he feel that this sight gave him a better view of his target, but more importantly, it would allow him to lower his head lower, and in turn, lower his entire profile, thus making him harder to spot. The lens could reflect light and reveal its position, as was the case with many Soviet snipers, who were sent to fight him, and instead met their end with the help of his outdated rifle. However, Häyhä is also trained with a Suomi 9mm light machine gun, and depending on the battle in progress, he also carries hand grenades and the traditional Puukko army knife as a last resort. As snipers who often acted alone outside the front lines, Häyhä had to be careful, and often sacrificed obvious targets if they compromised his position. The Soviets began to increase their counter-sniping activities, especially after Häyhä's murder tally brought him notoriety and disdain. If they suspected it was somewhere, they would order an artillery attack in its general direction in hopes of neutralizing it. There is even a story that a Soviet commander requested that a famous Soviet sniper be sent to eliminate Häyhä. After the sniper killed several Finnish soldiers and officers, he waited for Häyhä to react and finally show himself. He waited, and when the sun set, he decided to stop for a moment and was about to get up. That's when Häyhä shot him in the head. Another story is that Soviet soldiers began carrying large iron shields into the field, to help protect them from sniper fire. Finnish snipers like Häyhä were accurate enough that they simply shot him in the kneecap. Such stories began to circulate more and more, as Häyhä became famous in the eyes of friends and foes alike. Finnish propaganda described it as a symbol representing Finland's small and defiant struggle, while Soviet propaganda called it Balea Smrt, White Death. The legend of the White Death tells of a ghost-like figure who is both everywhere and nowhere, creeping tirelessly through the forest. The figure frightened the Soviet soldiers and boosted the morale of the Finnish soldiers. On the 17th of February 1940, 80 days after the invasion, Simo Häyhä was officially declared a hero of Finland by the Finnish government, and with hundreds of kills under his belt, he was awarded the Kola Cross. He was promoted and gifted a specially made Seikko M28-30 rifle. But despite the legend, Simo Häyhä was neither invincible nor a ghost. He is a human being, just like any other Finn on defense. In early March 1940, as winter settled in, it became clear that although Finland had shocked the world by holding back the mighty Red Army, they could not hold out forever. The Soviets are studying. They gathered more weapons and more competent leaders and tactics, and as winter ended, so did the Finns' advantage with the weather. No matter how bravely they resisted, the sheer number of troops would eventually crush them. On March 6, Häyhä was caught in the middle of a new Soviet attack on Kola. Fighting with regular troops, Häyhä again killed at least a dozen men that day. An exploding bullet hit his jaw and ripped open his lower face. Saved by his comrades, he was dragged out of the fighting and taken to hospital. He spent several days in a coma, and when he awoke on March 13, peace had been signed. The war was over for him and his country. For an area of some 25,000 square miles, the Soviets had paid a heavy price. Most estimates of the Soviet death toll were around 130,000, but the actual death toll may have been as high as 250,000. Finland had defeated the David and Goliath of the Soviet Union on a scale never before imagined, and Finland's independence had been saved. Simo Häyhä had to bear the scars on his face for the rest of his life, but other than that, he has made a full recovery. However, he could not return to his own home, which was now across the Soviet border, but he found a new home and lived a long and peaceful life until his death in 2002. In subsequent interviews, Häyhä repeatedly emphasized that while serving in the Winter War, he only did as he was told. But he's the best at it. Even within 100 days, his official score was 505 kills, making him the most successful sniper in history. That's just the official tally. And officially the number is higher. Of course, these numbers will always be debated. Such is the nature of war. But the legend of the White Death is still alive today, and not only in Finland. When asked what made him such a great marksman, Häyhä simply answered, practice. Thank you for watching. Help the channel grow by liking, commenting, subscribing,